Yeah, I'll share it.
Hold on, I'm gonna admit Lars to say one.
I mean, it doesn't. I mean,
Here, I'm gonna end this FaceTime. All right. Bye.
Is it frowned?
What's up, fellas?
What's up, Coach?
How you going, man?
Good, good. How about yourself?
Good, man. I'm ready for your debut.
Yeah. Me too.
Big turnout. Big turnout.
Yeah, a lot of guys so far.
Yeah, I'll do a quick little intro, and then you guys can go and then ask some questions at the end.
Yeah, that works.
Cool. We got Steve. I don't see Steve on the screen. There he is.
There it is.
Charlie, that's a mean mustache.
A little dark brown dye in there.
Cuccs, you're gonna share your screen, right?
yeah. Coach Burns said he's going to do a little intro and then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sharp,
yeah.
Barney. Looking sharp.
Thank you.
Barney, I like the button down.
That's
Yeah.
my boy.
Gotta be prepared.
I can smell the vineyard vines from here. That's a Fairfield County tuxedo right there.
Yes, it is.
Oh, Fred growing it out.
Where is Fred? I gotta find Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
What's up?
I like it. The colors.
Thanks.
All right. I think we'll get started right on time here. You know, we got the people who want to be here. You know, a quick little intro is I asked Steve and Christian to do this because I'm a huge believer in peer-to-peer teaching. And I believe that on the field and I believe it off the field. I also know that each of you in your own way is working really hard to build your own networks and learn how to tell your own individual stories and do research and distinguish and differentiate yourself. Is that I don't want that knowledge to kind of disappear or to be kind of monopolized. I think you guys are going to get the benefit of Harvard and Harvard lacrosse and our database and our network is, you know, you're rarely going to be head to head against one of your own teammates, even when we're dealing with our alumni helping us. So I think there's huge value in if you can learn one thing tonight about how to do your own internship search or your own job search, then this is a valuable 30 minutes. So, you know, it reinforces our concept of team. It lets you know that we all get better if we can share this knowledge. And when you leave, that it won't go with you, that'll be passed on down to the younger guys. And because as you know, I really want you to study what you want to study at Harvard. I think that makes you happy. I think if you're happy, you're a good citizen. If you're a good citizen, it's going to be really easy for me to help you and advocate for you. And if you're happy with school and you're happy with your development as a player, we're going to be a really, really good team. And so that was kind of my mentality around this. So now I'll pass it on to Steve and Christian.
Cool. I'm going to share my Prezi right now. Uh-oh. Barney,
right, I'll
you
do it.
disabled screen
fine.
share.
Yeah. Let's see.
And if I could add one more thing, it was Steve and Christian were both really, I think, appropriately aggressive in communicating with me about using our database, how I could help, how I could connect them with alums. And so I felt like since they were the most aggressive and most creative, I felt like I wanted to give them this platform. And they both had a lot of success in the process as well.
Hold up. This is being weird. Let's see if this works. Is that working for you guys?
Yep.
Go to, did you wait, fix the, because it's formatted for mine, Barney.
Is it? Oh, okay. I mean, that doesn't really matter. It's just a small difference. All right, Steve, you want to start us off?
Cool. Yeah. So Coach Byrne obviously gave us a little intro there. Really, Christian and I are just going to kind of share our experiences with the Harvard Lacrosse alumni database and just our networking process to end up with internships. And really, this is not the end all be all Bible to networking or recruiting, but I definitely think there are some pointers that we could share and some people could use. So I definitely think this could be worthwhile for you guys and excited to share.
So the first thing I want to talk about was some general Harvard Lax database guidelines. So steps to using the database. The first thing I recommend is determine your interests, understanding like what you're interested in and possibly the field you would want to research people in will really help you make your search more efficient and the calls that you have go quicker. Another thing I recommend is join the LinkedIn groups, as Coach said. And then second step for me, also keep an open mind about your interests because a lot of people get stuck into like the whole finance thing and don't really look besides that. So although my interest is finance, I would like to like research other things and maybe get an internship next summer in something that isn't finance. So the second step that Steve and I recommend is to use the database. The database has over 800 names on it with 15 different industries. So there's bound to be somebody within that database that can help you. And it's probably going to be more than 10 people. So you have to do the legwork here. I know the legwork's going to take a really long time, but you're going to thank yourself later because it really does help a lot. And then so the third step is contact Coach Byrne. Coach Byrne has been a great resource, acting as a liaison between the players and the alumni. And so what I recommend is you create a list of maybe 10 to 15 people that you have already researched and you know what they do, know their role, and have maybe possible questions for them. And I suggest that you send that to Coach Byrne and he will cross-reference with his list and see if they have expressed interest in helping our players. And if they have, then maybe he'll introduce you and then this will eventually lead to networking. So. Cuccs.
Yeah. So we just wanted to give a little breakdown of database statistics based on industry. And this is something that I think I tried to take advantage of a little bit when it came to my networking process. Is when I reached out to Coach Byrne, I wanted to vary the industries of the people that I had the opportunity to speak with. I got the opportunity to speak with consultants, people in finance, people in investing roles, economists. And I really think you could see from the breakdown here that if there's an industry that you're interested in, you should definitely try to take advantage of it and make those connections. Because I think you'll have that opportunity to speak with people of different industries will provide the best learning experience for you.
Hey, Stephen and Christian, can you guys talk about a little bit about kind of the responsiveness of the guys that you interacted with?
Yeah,
sure.
I think we're actually that. Well, I think that yeah. We'll
all right,
touch on that a little bit.
We're getting to that.
Okay, good.
So we're going to start off with the non-junior year internship recruiting. Although it's less recruiting and more relationship stuff, Steve's going to start us off on this one with his experience.
Yeah. So Christian and I are going to try and just kind of share our personal experience doing this, and then we'll kind of get to more general tips when it came to the fall internship search. So, like I said, you want to start by determining where your interests are and what are your goals from this recruiting experience. And really, I looked at it on two platforms. Is I wanted to look at people with internship with career experience that I was really particularly interested in, and I also wanted to look at people who had the potential to use their network and use their connections to help provide me an internship. So that was kind of how I determined my goals and interests. Next, I went to the database and used those criteria in order to determine a list of people that I thought were of particular interest to me. And that's where I reached out to Coach Byrne, and he was the person who facilitated the first connection with the 5 to 10 people that I emailed to him. And from that, within 2 days, I had an email back from every single alumni that Coach Byrne put me in touch with. And then within 2 weeks, I had the opportunity to speak with all 5 people that Coach Byrne introduced to me. And I really think that showed the overall enthusiasm of the network to help me and help Harvard lacrosse players in their internship search. And next, so I started making phone calls to those people, like I said, and that kind of went to landing the internship. Of those 5 people, none of them had the authority or the ability to offer me an internship when I spoke with them. However, they were super helpful in terms of providing advice and sharing their experiences, but they also wanted to share people within their own network. And that second level of networking was where I was able to find the connection that led to my internship. So one of my original contacts shared Dean Graham's information, and I was able to get in touch with him, and he's the CEO of Sector Financial, and he put me in touch with the team. I ultimately interviewed, and now I am working with the lender finance team in a debt investing role. And Morgan Cheek is actually my direct boss. So that's a really cool experience. I'm learning a lot.
So my fall internship was actually a little bit of a different process than Steve's. I started this summer when I talked to my dad's or my friend's dad, and he basically suggested that I start by creating a networking spreadsheet. And this was prior to the database being sent out. So I basically came up with a bunch of names of people I'd be interested in talking to within my network that's close to my family, and because I'm lucky enough to grow up in Connecticut, and that's a pretty big hotspot for finance. But there's a few weeks after that where Coach Burns sent out the Cuccs database, and that's where I really started to do the legwork. And so what I did was I screened the database and limited it to the finance people on that database. And so that was about 260 names. And after that, I limited that down by doing more research basically on each individual person. And after that, I cross-referenced my list with my dad's contacts, his Harvard contacts, and he started to put me in contact with some people I was interested in talking with. And this led to about 20 plus connections, including secondary connections. But all of them were Harvard lacrosse people, not the secondary connections, but the original connections. And so they were super helpful and super receptive to me, asking them questions, asking for internships. And there was actually one alumni, Reed Hubbard, who introduced me probably to 10 people. And he has expressed an interest in my personal life and really helping me. So it's been really awesome. And so my current internship was actually an internship opportunity. We got an email from Coach Byrne. And so I responded and sent an email to the Harvard lacrosse alumni, Doug, who is a partner at Kenny Lewis, and Kenny Lewis is the firm I work at now. And it took him a decent amount of time to respond. I sent him a follow-up email, and it was probably total like a month. So the process can take a very long time. But one thing I would really like to emphasize is you got to be patient, because opportunities will come, but these guys are super busy and they don't always have the time to talk to you right away. So I would suggest taking your time and sending a follow-up email maybe a couple weeks later. So after I talked to Doug about a month later, I had 2 more calls with the CFO, and that eventually led to me being a fall intern at Kenny Lewis. So the non-junior year internship, where to start? So biggest thing for this is relationship driven. Most of these calls will not end up in internships, but the goal of these are to develop a relationship for the long term. So you really want to be able to talk to these guys in the future and maybe develop a dialogue or something like that, so that maybe they can give you an internship in your junior summer or something like that. But one thing I would focus on if you're really looking for an internship prior to junior year is have a more focused networking search. And so basically what that means is maybe look at guys who have more power in their firm, so they have more opportunities and leeway to give you an internship, because a lot of the big firms, the structured like Morgan Stanley, they don't really have opportunities for underclassmen. And then next, basically a big thing too is you really want to learn from these opportunities and speaking to these guys, because they do know a lot, and it's a really good opportunity to see if you're actually interested in what they're talking about. And so
Yeah, I think it's important for guys to know that when Steve and Christian are saying keep an open mind, I think you can interpret that a couple of different ways. One is, you know, if you're talking to somebody before you're kind of, rising junior summer, rising senior summer, somebody who's 40 to 50 years old has probably had 3 or 4 different jobs already. He may have started in sales and trade. If you're interested in finance, he may have started in sales and trading and ended up in private equity, or he started in investment banking and then ended up, working for a hedge fund. Is that just because a guy is doing something now that's relevant to you, it may mean he did something 3 or 4 other things. Conversely, when you're looking at an alumni's current position, make sure you go on LinkedIn and dig a little bit deeper, because his prior job might be really connected to what you're interested in. So I think Christian said something at the beginning is, listen, probably about 60% of our living alumni right now are in some sort of finance, but we have guys in sports marketing and law and medicine and architecture and education and service. We're all over the place. We can touch every industry. It just happens that a lot of lacrosse guys want to get into finance, but you don't have to do that just because everybody's doing it. Make sure you have a real passion for it.
That was one big thing that the calls I had, people kept emphasizing that especially for me, because I'm still technically a freshman, going to be a rising sophomore next year, was to keep an open mind, because you don't really know what you really want to do even after college. As Coach Burns said, guys will get jobs and then just leave them 2 years later, kind of thing. So, Steve.
Yeah. And to piggyback onto that, so we're looking to leverage this alumni network that's extensive, that it's got people in all sorts of industries. And how are we going to use that? Is I really think the database is an incredible resource, and I really used it a lot in my internship process. And when I was looking at this list, at first it's kind of daunting. You're looking at 800 plus names, but really you want to break it down and look at different criteria that you want to hit and people that have experience that really interest you. So I looked at on 2 different levels. First being, what was their career path? What were their jobs prior to the one they had? And I think it was really cool to speak with people who maybe didn't take the beaten path, investment banking to private equity, and they've been at whatever shop they're at for 30 years. I think it was cool to see people who maybe went to graduate school, or people who were an economist first, worked in the public sector. And I got to speak with all sorts of people on that front. And that was one of the best learning experiences for me, because those people have a unique take on their career paths. And I really thought that was a great learning experience. And then the second level is in this non-junior year internship search. Like Christian said, this is more relationship driven. It's less formal. It's not necessarily a 2-round interview process you'll see for a junior year. So I really was looking for people who had the ability and the experience to really help me on this front. Next, by breaking it down on that front, I broke this list down to about 5 to 10 people who I was really interested in. These were the people that had the experience I liked and were potentially able to help me on this internship search that I was going through. And that came from a variety of industries. Like I said, I spoke with economists, consultants, asset managers, sales and trading, investment banking. That was really where I found I learned a ton in terms of what might be the right path for me. And then share this list with Coach Byrne. And like I said before, within 2 weeks, I was able to speak with 5 to 10 people, and those people were connecting me with a secondary level of connections, which expanded my network. And that's really kind of where the idea of network effect starts.
So one thing Steve and I are going to talk about and say a lot in this presentation is do the legwork. And honestly, that is the most important thing I think I could say, is doing the legwork will get you a step ahead of everybody else. Because believe it or not, a lot of people will not do what they need to do in order to get these good internships or these networking calls. So before these networking calls happen, I recommend you prepare, do your due diligence. You want to know their career path, know their company, and know their role. You want to be able to prepare questions and have those on like a note sheet or something like that. So personally, what I have is I have a folder basically designated for these networking calls, and each networking call has their own Word document, and I have note prep on those as well as a list of questions. And then underneath that, I keep notes on what they say in order to keep a running dialogue with them and reference what they said previously, in order basically to impress them. Because if you keep these questions and you know what they said previously, they're going to be impressed. And lastly, be enthusiastic. You want to learn as much as you can from this, especially before junior year. You want to learn what you do or learn what you want to do and learn what they do, and to see if that's actually an interest of yours. Call outcomes. One thing I want to emphasize as well is most of these calls did not end up in internship opportunities right away, or they won't at all. Usually what calls will end up as is just like kind of learning about their experience and learning maybe how they can help you or how you can help them, maybe do project work for something. But you want to learn as much as possible about what they do. And then calls generally are more effective when you're genuinely curious. That means like their questions are genuine and not like fake. They don't feel forced, and the conversation kind of flows. And this all comes from the preparation. And then freshmen, yeah, exactly. You want to build more long-term relationships so they can help you in the future, maybe with your junior year internship. And then networking effects. A lot of my calls led to and secondary connections. And basically all these alumni, even the secondary connections, were super receptive to me talking to them. And then be patient. Opportunities will come. And then some takeaways from your non-junior internship. Talk to people that you have a real interest in. Do your research, do the legwork, as I said. Show the alumni that you have a genuine interest. Make sure you're reading about their company, about what they do. So one thing I actually did for my internship was I talked to a kid who I knew from my high school who had an internship there, and he recommended that I read a book prior to the call or prior to the interview. And so that's what I did. And I think it really impressed him because I knew a lot about his company, especially even though I was only a freshman. This also, knowing what you're talking about maximizes your comfort. You'll feel comfortable talking to them. And then thirdly, don't be afraid to reach out to alumni. Everybody was super nice and they wanted to help you. And persistence. Yeah. So Steve's going to take over the junior year internship recruiting process.
Steve?
Yeah.
Can you quickly, just for the freshmen in particular,
Mhm.
just explain quickly junior year versus non-junior year, just so they can understand it chronologically?
So what Barney and I were just talking about was what we called the non-junior year internship. And what that is, like we said, it's a little bit, it's more of a relationship thing. This is after your freshman summer. This is after your sophomore. This is after your freshman year, after your sophomore year. These are less formal. You're not going to go through a organized interviewing process. This is a lot of times, at least for Christian and I, it came on through a networking call, and you were able to make a connection with someone who had an opportunity within their firm. And that's how you ended up with the non-junior year opportunity. And now when I'm talking about junior year, this is following your junior year. In that summer, you're going to have a formal internship, and that's you're going to have an application. You're going to have first round interviews, second round interviews, a super day, and then ultimately an offer. So this is more of a formal process that you're going to have to do. You're going to be competing with a much larger pool of people. So I think it's a little bit more structured, but it's a little bit more competitive because you're competing with a larger pool of people. So that's kind of the gist between non-junior year and junior year. This junior year internship is really the end goal in your process, because this typically leads to full-time offers and jobs after college, which is, of course, the goal.
So this is your June through August internship prior to the start of your senior year.
Yep, typically like a 10-week program, and
Right.
it's off a lot of it's, particularly with finance, this is the big one that you want to hit. So yeah, so I'll walk kind of similar structure to the last segment. walk you through the structure of how I got my internship for the next summer and kind of go through some general tips. So this starts freshman year, this process, and that was building a resume and making myself the most well-rounded candidate I can be. And then looking more towards the direct search for jobs, I started researching firms that I was particularly interested in early summer of 2020. And this is for summer of 2021 I'm applying for. So if you can picture that, that's right after your sophomore year ends. You are beginning your process for junior year, post-junior year internships. That's something that I certainly was not aware of when I was going through this originally, because this obviously I've had this opportunity to go through it twice now that I'm taking this year off. So early summer 2020, I researched the firms, and by July, August, I was submitting applications and really preparing for the networking / interview prep process. And then during this time, July, August, I really started to build my network in each of the firms I was applying to. And this started with Harvard Lacrosse, but I made sure that I wanted to build outwards. So I didn't want to just stick within Harvard Lacrosse, because then I'm getting a very narrow scope of the companies that I'm applying for, and I'm not really getting my name out to the broader population. So I used that first level with Harvard Lacrosse, and that helped me move forward and connect with a much wider array of people. And then finally in August and early September is I took this time to really prepare for interviews from a technical perspective. Every day for I would say about 4 weeks, I was spending a couple hours a day learning the finance technical questions that you don't learn when you're in college. So being that Harvard's a liberal arts school, you don't take the finance classes that you'll see at business schools like Penn Wharton or Georgetown Business School or where have you. So this is a lot of legwork and a lot of work behind the scenes that you have to do coming from a liberal arts school. And then also you have to do firm-specific, tailored research. You have to know why you want to work there. You have to know the culture. And this comes from your networking calls and really doing work on that front. And ultimately, in September, between this prep and the networking that I did, I was able to receive an offer from Barclays in late September. That was kind of my timeline. So this timeline is just generic. What I didn't know, so for freshmen, if you don't understand my timeline for school, is I've already completed my junior year. I'm taking this year off from school. And so I've kind of had this opportunity to go through it twice. Last fall, I did this the internship interview process, and I really was unprepared, was kind of behind the 8 ball on all fronts. So this year I definitely learned from that experience and really helped me in terms of staying on top of when deadlines are coming and how I should be going about my interview process. So, like I said, starts freshman year. You want to, between every year, you want to try and build new experiences that you're going to be able to use and apply to during an interview. And then during your sophomore spring, this is when you should really begin your search. You're looking for firms that interest you. You are looking at industries that interest you, and you're researching the timeline that is specific to that company. And then post-sophomore year summer, this is when you start submitting applications, beginning the networking process with HLAX alum. This is when you start your interview prep from a technical perspective, and this is where you do most of your work. You don't want to wait till your junior fall, because if you wait till your junior fall, you are going to be behind. Make sure you are doing this stuff during the summer when you have time and before interviews start, because once interviews start, everything happens quickly. So you want to make sure that you've done all the work prior. And then junior fall, this should just be closing up any loose ends and making sure that you're prepared for your interviews, super days, and ultimately receiving offers.
Explain to the freshmen what a super day is, Steve.
So a super day is basically a series of interviews. So you'll have a first round interview, which is typically a Zoom like this, and then you will have a super day, which occurs about a week and a half later after your first round interview. And this is the second round. This is so I had 2 super days this fall. One was 5 45-minute consecutive interviews, and the other was 2 hour and 15-minute interviews back to back. So that's kind of how a super day is. It's a long process, but like I said, if you're doing the prep beforehand, it's you should be prepared for these kind of events.
And let me chime in here. It's important that you guys know that I want you guys to pursue these things. I ask a lot of you. Harvard asks a lot of you. There's a lot asked of you as a member of our program. And if it's really easy for me to endorse you when I know you're a good person, good citizen, good member of our team. So the last thing you have to worry about from me is walking up to me and saying, Coach, I have to fly to New York for my super day. That was not a problem. We had a bunch of guys who had to do that this fall. That's not held against you. Particularly if I know that you're a good person, good citizen, good teammate, good student. I know you're going to make up that work. So you never have to worry about that conversation with me.
Definitely. And that was something I experienced, like Coach said, just to emphasize that last fall, I had a couple super days in the fall and missed practice, but then we use those hours later in the week, and you can get more of like an individual session with Coach. So we definitely make up those hours elsewhere, but just definitely openly communicate that with Coach. It was definitely not a problem for me. Now getting back to the PowerPoint here. So looking to build a resume. When I'm looking at building a resume, I broke it down mentally into 4 categories. You have your academic portion, your athletic portion, your work experience portion, and then your others. So from academics, what I really emphasize to young guys right now is take classes that genuinely interest you. This was huge in my interviews. I had the opportunity to speak about 2 or 3 classes that really particularly interested me, and those came up in legitimately every single interview I had. And if you're genuinely interested in the classes you're taking, this is an easy conversation. I really thought this was a point of that was really strong. That was a strong suit for me in my interviews. But also on that front, we want to make sure we can handle our workload. GPA does matter. It is something that employers will look at. So make sure you can handle your workload and be diligent about your classwork. But really try and balance those two. I think that you could really build a strong academic portfolio. Next, athletics. Obviously, we all have that. Don't need to talk too much about it. But the biggest things that come from athletics is your team building experience, your time management, your work ethic. It's all proven through the sports. And this is something that employers love to see. Next, and something that I think I would, if I was a freshman, what I would want to know is that work experience is super important. I really thought when I was a freshman, I go to Harvard, I'm going to get offers from places just because I play sports and I go to a really good school. And that's not the case. You're competing for the very best internships, and you're competing with people who also really smart and all have great extracurriculars. So you want to make sure you're doing stuff above and beyond just the athletics and academics. And that's where work experience comes into play. It shows you're interested in their industry. It shows that you've put the time in when you don't have to during the summer months when really you don't have sports or school. You're putting the time in there to really expand your experiences, and these come up in interviews. Every interview I had also mentioned my work experience and asked me, well, what about your internship is something that, how does that apply to our company, and how does that make you a better candidate? And then finally, you have the others category. And that's just to show you're a well-rounded person. You're not just a lacrosse player. You're not just a CS guy. You have other interests, clubs, volunteering, and an interest section at the bottom of your page. I got to talk about being a Patriots fan from Long Island a few times in interviews. And that's an easy conversation because it makes me seem like I have something more than just playing lacrosse and going to school. I have other interests, and that's something that I would definitely include on a resume. Next one here. Yeah, so this is the networking portion, and this is a little bit different from the non-junior year process. This is you want to use the Harvard Lacrosse Network, but what I found was most helpful was actually reaching out to the recent grads, the guys who just graduated last year and the year before that, because they're at the bottom level. They know tons of people, tons of analysts in the firm, and those connections were really helpful to me. And just to specifically point to my Barclays experience, I reached out to Brett Clark and Joe Lang, two former teammates of mine, and they put me in touch with over 10 people in the firm. And that is something, and those conversations were the most important towards really getting my name out there to Barclays and putting myself in a position where they knew that I was doing the work behind the scenes and wasn't just talking to lacrosse guys. I was reaching out to people that I didn't know, I wasn't necessarily comfortable with. And I thought that was a really helpful point in my recruiting process. In those calls, you want to reference those networking calls in your interviews. You want to show your interviewer that you put the time in, you were willing to call people that you didn't know, and that you were genuinely interested. You remembered what they said and why, and the different points they made. And that goes back to Christian's point from earlier. You want to stay organized, take notes, and that's super helpful in that process. And then the second point is be prepared, be persistent, and always call people. During the month of July and August, I was probably taking 1 to 2 calls every single day to try and just at different banks and different firms. And that really helps you learn, and it helps you create connections that are going to put you in a position to compete for these competitive positions. On an interview prep perspective, so you want to use your resources. And when I say use your resources, that's your teammates. You have so many people who are going through this process right now with you and who just completed it. Those are the people who understand it, know how to prepare the best, and are so closely removed from it. And just to give a shout out to some guys like Chris Rhoda, Jake Bowl, George Loring, Nick Loring, those guys were hopped on the phone with me numerous times and were giving me pointers and tips about how I can best position myself and best prepare for this. And like, I never went through this before, and it's really impossible to do this the right way if you don't have that experience. So you want to reach out to people with that experience, and they could share their knowledge. That peer-to-peer learning, like Coach Byrne mentioned, was incredibly helpful for me. And then also outside of that, you want to reach out, you want to use your networking connections. On every single phone call I asked, if I was speaking to someone from Barclays, I said, well, why do you want to work at Barclays? Why do you like your experience there? And what about it separates it from other places? And those questions, where I took notes on each of those questions, and that helped me formulate, well, why do I want to work at Barclays, or why don't I want to work at firm XYZ? And that's really something that you could bring up in interviews, because every firm wants to know, well, why do you want to work here? Is this just a shot in the dark, or is this something that you genuinely are interested in? So that was a great resource as well. And then finally, from the technical perspective, use your study guides. If you reach out to your older upperclassmen, they have study guides they prepared. They have manuals of interview questions that are asked. You want to use those. And then me in particular, I loved using YouTube tutorials. That was my go-to. And I watched probably 15 hours of YouTube tutorials, and that was my best resource. But you want to make sure you're using whatever resources are at your disposal. And lastly, put your time in, do it. Make sure you are not doing this the week before. Start early. When the interviews come around, you want to know this like the back of your hand, and it eases the stress on this process tremendously.
So some final thoughts for you guys is just to kind of summarize what we talked about, and then we'll take questions at the end. But use the Harvard Lacrosse Network. Everybody wants to help. Harvard Lacrosse is a pretty tight-knit network right now. I was talking to my dad the other day, and he was on a Zoom call with the AD they invited like all the athletic alumni, and he said about a quarter of it was men's lacrosse, which is really impressive. And I think it really shows how tight-knit we are, and they really do want to help and see what's going on in our lives. Secondly, put your time in. As I said, we repeated the words legwork a lot, or legwork, and that's on purpose. You got to do it. Preparation, network, studying. Even if you're not going into your junior summer or sophomore summer, you still need to be studying what you want to do and what you want to learn about and all that stuff. You can never really have a day off, in my view. Kind of constantly have to be always like thinking about your next move and be patient. And then you're going to get a lot of no's, but all you need is one yes. So it's kind of it.
All right.
All right. Questions?
Who's got some questions for these guys? I have a question for you.
Mhm.
What if you could pick one thing, one nugget that you'd like to expand on here, to pass on to your teammates, what would it be?
I'll go first here. I think if there's one thing, it's always be on the phone, always be calling people. This is you'll get comfortable reaching out to people you don't know. At first, I didn't want to talk to anyone that I didn't know. And then basically you just become more and more comfortable with this process. And the more people you talk to, the more experiences you hear from, the better you will be able to tailor your search and your internship research. And that's something that I think I learned from, especially from my junior year to this gap year where I had this opportunity to do a second time.
And that, your generation technologically in some ways thinks talking is texting. So
Yeah.
and again, it's not your fault. You guys all watch The Social Dilemma. You've been programmed. But getting used to talking to people on the phone,
Mhm.
Steve is exactly right. Practice it, do it, text less, call more. What else? What was your one thing, Christian?
I was actually going to expand on that and mention how, like, first few times I started talking to people, I was nervous, didn't really know what to say or how to say it. And then as you do it more and more, you kind of learn how to express your story and why you're interested in what you're interested in. And eventually, basically every call is an interview. So eventually when you get to your real interviews, you're going to be ready and you're going to be prepared to express your interests and what your story is and why you want to work at that firm.
So I think one of the things that you all, and this is probably true for the next 5 to 7 years of your life, is being able to articulate what it's like to be at Harvard, to be a student athlete, to have those demands, those time crunches, those guidelines, those deadlines, those expectations every day, but still be able to be successful. You finding your own way to articulate that is often the difference between you getting an offer and not getting an offer, because you're often going to be up against somebody who has a higher GPA, who has more free time, who doesn't have that same schedule as yours. So being able to speak to that in a way that's not self-serving, but shows confidence, that shows humility and self-awareness, but also toughness and hunger, that's a delicate thing to do. But if you're somebody, and anybody who's on this Zoom, I'm not saying you need to write it out and rehearse it, but you're going to get asked that question in some way. And being able to speak to it, to speak to the student athlete experience, it's why athletes run shit. Because they failed over and over and they keep on coming back. So find your way to speak to that, because that is a distinguishing thing when you get into that super day or you get into the Final Four for a job and it's you and 3 non-athletes and you look around, you should be saying, I'm going to crush these other 3 people because they've never failed. And I have, and I keep on coming back. So find your way to speak to that. I think that's a critical skill that you want to get your head and your way to speak to it. I think that's critical. What else? Who has got questions for these guys? Anybody want to jump in?
Could I ask one?
Yeah.
Sure.
Go.
Barney, how were the calls when you were trying to because until I talked to my advisor the other week, I didn't really think that internship freshman summer was a thing, but now after talking to him about that, hearing you guys talk about it makes me really interested and wanting to do something like that. How was it getting on the phone with them saying, were they like, do you think they were more reluctant that you were coming out of your freshman year, or?
I mean, so that's why you got to kind of have to look at more boutique firms and smaller firms because they will have more leeway in that situation. So, or you can like look at startups, but one way to do it is you ask, like, I'm looking for experience. Do you know anybody or any possible way I could get that before my sophomore or junior summer kind of way or kind of thing? And they will generally maybe point you in a direction, or maybe how they'll have some project work for you to do. But generally it's not going to end up in like a legit internship, especially at the bigger firms, because they can't. But maybe they'll have a contact that is starting up like I don't know what you're interested in, but say it's starting up like a small hedge fund or something like that. And they want to take you on because they just need somebody to do the legwork. So.
But George, I think Christian touched upon this. You may look at your, families of people who you went to school with at St. John's. Is, looking up all your old former teammates from St. John's, there's probably 10 to 20 guys who are doing really interesting shit, and so you might just reach into them because it might be paid or it might be not. It might just be job shadowing. It might be something that you can either, hey, I'm somewhat interested in that. Why don't I follow that guy around during Christmas break for 2 weeks and see if that really piques my interest, and maybe I can get something a little more formal that summer where you're just getting paid hourly. You know what I mean? So part of it is resume building. Part of it is confirmation of, hey, I'm really interested in something, and then you get exposed to it, and it either proves it or disproves it. So
yeah, that's the biggest thing. If I had to say one thing, Georgie, it's you want to show that you are committed to learning. And I think people love to hear that. If you're committed to learning, that they know that you're not just doing this because you're trying to use them to get a better internship. You're actually genuinely interested in their experience that they can help provide. And just showing that interest is the most important thing in those phone calls, and that comes from preparing for the calls and making sure that you know what you want to get out of it, and you're making the most of your time with them on the phone, because they'll genuinely appreciate that you're prepared and you're not just coming in to shoot the shit for 15 minutes. It's you have an agenda, you want to learn these things, and they can help you with that. So if you're prepared, they're going to appreciate it, no doubt.
The Christian and Steve touched on a couple of different things. You guys have a lot of tools at your access. The database, shout out to Coach Kyle and to Coach Corrigan and Coach Bergman. All of us have, basically like hundreds of hours filling that in. And it's a living, breathing document. So don't be afraid every couple of weeks to reach out to us if you'd like to get the most current version, because we're filling in more and more data and much more content. The LinkedIn initiative is a way for us to dig even deeper about some of our guys. We're approaching 400 members, and there's probably a ceiling of about 500 because people of a certain age won't, either they don't need to be on LinkedIn anymore because they're so successful, or they're just old and they don't want to use that technology anymore. But LinkedIn is a great, easy way for you to go deeper on somebody's background, and you can see their history, which is really important, that Steve touched on. Having a sense of a guy's pathway to his current position, I think, is really interesting. It's interesting as a conversation point, and it's interesting that he's going to have some perspective on something that's relevant to you. We're going to do a thing with the Harvard Varsity Club. Jess Perillo, and if you don't know who she is, you should know. She does the career services piece of the Letter Winner Society at Harvard. She's done a really, really good job, particularly since the start of the pandemic, because that gives you access to every letter winner every athlete who's ever been at Harvard. So if our database is 900 people, the Harvard Varsity Club's database is 25, 30,000 currently living former Harvard student athletes. So you want to tap into that because it could be somebody from another sport who's got the kind of job and career path that you want. Office of Career Services, the Harvard Alumni Association, which is the massive database of all the people who have connected to Harvard. So you can pretty quickly get to 100,000 plus people who are connected to Harvard. So it's really limitless how deep and how wide and how broad you can go. Is Coach Bergman, are you still on the phone?
Yes.
Yeah, can you send out the career kind of the alumni career thing that we built for the recruits?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll send that out to you guys because it'll lay out all the different resources and access points you guys have for career stuff. I think relative to a lot of the stuff what Christian and Steve were talking about is, and they didn't say this, but they did a good job of articulating is when you're building your network, it's not a transaction. It's not like you call somebody and they give you a job. You being genuine, being prepared, being curious, providing value to them. It's not just about you getting something. You could be reading the journal or reading whatever industry you're interested in. You might observe something and share it back with them, and maybe they didn't get a chance to see it. So it's not all about you. So make sure that you come in with it with a confidence, but also a humility. And like, I'm just trying to learn. And the more I learn, I can learn more about people, I can learn more about this firm, I can learn more about this industry. Now you're going to start having genuine opinions that aren't based on what you just read, that you're going to be able to dig deep and have real insight that might impress somebody someday. These guys talked about the alums several times. We as a staff have worked tremendously hard in engaging with them. And listen, some alumni, they would rather not be too involved, but they'll write you a big check. Other guys, not you a big check, our program a big check. Other guys haven't reached that point yet, and their way of being generous is to give you 20 minutes of their time. So you're talking about different kinds of value. And one of the things that we've all learned, the coaching staff, is there's a real hunger to help. There's a real pride in this place, a real hope in the future of our program on the field and in our community of Harvard. And if this is a small way that they can perpetuate that, they're going to do it. And as a result, it sounded like, I'm not sure if it's 100% sure, but anybody that Christian reached out to and anybody that Steve reached out that they heard back from them. And that doesn't happen every day. So that's respect for you and belief and pride in our program. So, and at some point, you're going to be in that position, and I hope you do the same thing. When some guy who in the 2022 class, who maybe if you're an upperclassman, you'll never play with, but when that guy reaches out to you, then you won't put it on the bottom of your list. You'll find a way to connect with that guy that day. Steve and Christian didn't talk about, but Coach Bergman and I learned about it, and our rest of our coaches, that you guys can take business classes at MIT, right? Steve, did you do that, or Christian, are you planning on doing that?
No, but I would absolutely, going through the especially the finance route, taking the accounting course at MIT. I know some of the juniors or pseudo juniors have taken it, and that's an experience that I certainly recommend. This past summer, when my internship that I was supposed to do got canceled, I took a class at the Harvard Business School that taught accounting basics, and that's certainly something I'd recommend. If you can get your hands on courses like that, you're going to just be more prepared going into interviews, and these topics are definitely things you can touch on when you come into interviews.
Yeah, one resource I would emphasize too is the LinkedIn learning classes are all free for us. And there are hundreds of classes on there and on a variety of topics. And I probably did about 10 of those, and they're pretty short. So they're a pretty good way to gauge what your interest is without taking up too much of your time. And I also know some kids did the HBS. I don't know what it is, but it's like a variety of courses kind of shortened, and supposedly that's pretty good, and it's pretty cheap during the summer, so that's a good option as well. And Coursera, you can always take Coursera courses, which are free. So
Lincoln Learning?
LinkedIn, it's LinkedIn Learning.
Oh, LinkedIn Learning, okay.
So I don't think any of them are on, but the 3 guys that took that MIT accounting class were Chase Strupp, Tommy Joyce, and Schlendorf.
Yeah.
So if you guys were curious about that, just reach out to them.
All right. Good, thank you. And then some guys from a business, they do, how's that? I know the Tuck Summer Bridge. Is anybody taking that? Anybody on the phone take that?
I have, yeah.
How was it,
really
Kyle?
great. It was basically, it's like a 30-day course, and it's essentially like a mini MBA program that covers like accounting, financial modeling. You do like DCF analysis, and it's really good. But
pretty, you know, so you I know you likely probably had a finance internship before that, but is it really catered to people who are coming from a liberal arts school?
I think it's only liberal arts schools, honestly.
Okay.
So yeah, it is really catered towards that.
So everybody's coming basically at the same starting line.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's good. So for the freshmen, that's the Dartmouth College Tuck School of Business Summer Bridge program. Is that usually sophomore to junior, end of sophomore year into junior, or
Yeah,
is it?
there's also a winter option, by the way. I think like late December into January or something like that I was looking at this year. But it would be all virtual.
But do people do it like after their sophomore year or after their freshman year?
I think it's usually, I mean, I don't really know if it makes a difference, but I think it's usually after sophomore year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is only after sophomore year, I'm pretty sure.
Great. You know, I think the last point, does anybody else have any other questions?
I had a quick question for Cuccs. On one of your slides for building a resume for your junior year internship,
Yeah.
you had a bullet point about work experience.
Yeah.
I was just kind of curious about like what kind of work experience you mean, like if you mean like experience in terms of internships or like, you know, working like, you know,
Sure.
like in the lawn, like what exactly like does that mean by work?
Yeah. So when I'm talking about work experience, it's things that are going to be relevant towards what you're looking to do in the long run. So it doesn't have to be, if you want to do investment banking, this doesn't have to be an investment banking internship. But I think the best internship, the best experience you can get is something that you can express. So you go into your investment banking interview and they ask you, well, why did you do this opportunity? What was your thought process? You can say, well, I really thought it would be a good opportunity to learn X, Y, and Z. And these are the things that I learned from this opportunity. And it doesn't have to be a formal internship. It could be a 3-week shadowing program. It could be, after my freshman year, I interned at Hearst with the corporate development and M&A team. And James Swartz's dad works at Hearst, and he was able to get me that opportunity. So like, that was like an informal 4-week program, and I was just kind of shadowing people in the office. And you could put that on your resume, and when an interview comes, you want to be able to express why it's relevant and why and what you learned from that opportunity. So it doesn't need to be formal, but it should be relevant, and you should be able to articulate why you wanted to do that.
Well, that being said, don't be afraid to have something on there that if you're turning big rocks into little rocks for 40 hours a week in summer, that's a conversation starter because that's hard manual labor. So yeah, Steve's relevance, I think, is really important. But if one of the things you have to do is make money and you need to get some job where you're getting paid, under the table and you're picking things up and putting them down, have that on there too, because you're talking about things that distinguish you: athlete, Harvard, manual labor, and you had some sort of finance experience. So if you're working camps or you started your own business or things like that, don't be afraid to put that on there. That, again, it's another way for you to distinguish yourself. The last two things I'll say before we wrap it up is great job to Steve and Christian. Thanks for doing this. I think this is really helpful for me. I learned a lot, and I wrote down a bunch of ideas of things where we might expand on it. I'm not sure we'll have you do it, Steve, but learning more about this timeline, I think, is really important. Like, if you don't know there's a timeline, you're already behind. So I may talk to you about that. Maybe you help us, maybe you don't. But I learned a lot. I think it's important that guys, particularly the younger guys or the guys who haven't picked their concentration yet, in general, your future employers don't give a shit. If it really mattered so much, nobody from Harvard would get a job in finance because we don't have an undergraduate business school. But somehow Harvard guys are at key points in nearly every industry out there. So make sure you're studying what you want. Don't take econ. I know I've beaten this to death. Don't take econ because you think some future Wall Street interviewer is going to be impressed. Econ is too boring to do that. Don't do it. So make sure you study what you want and do it well. As your feet, I want you to remember, just like I want you to teach your teammate how to do something, as you're feeding yourself and getting better, make sure you're feeding your teammates as well. And that's why we started this thing with Christian and Steve, because I expect you to be teaching each other everything, lessons about school and, obviously within the honor guidelines, but helping each other so we can all move forward. That helps our team. And by not monopolizing this knowledge, we've now raised up our whole group. So feed yourself, feed others at the same time. And, I would say that the last thing is what I hope my reward is, or our reward is, that as you pursue and study what you want, and you have this pathway to start your career where you want, that our reward is, man, it's not that hard for me to work to become a really good teammate and a really good player. That's particularly true now as we're spread all over this country. So when you think about how fortunate you are to be where you are and to have what you have, the least you can do is be a great teammate, to do as well as you can in school, to try to become as good of a player as you've always dreamed of becoming. Because if we have those three things, man, there is no ceiling for our program. So Steve and Christian, thank you very much. Great job. I'm not sure what we're going to do next. I'd like to do more of these. If people have ideas or if they have something that they would like to share and they would like to do one, please let me know. I don't want to make a schedule because I want it to be organic. I want someone either value that we can give to each other or an interesting thing to share. So, and I'll leave you with this last thing, and I promise this is the last thing. I had a conversation with a guy who's a Harvard grad, but not a Harvard lacrosse grad, wasn't an athlete. And this guy's a major player. I didn't know he was a major player. I knew a little bit that he was a big hitter, but I come to know that the guy is a player. Like he's a big deal. And like he is so passionate about hiring athletes because of all the reasons that we know. You have to find your way to tell your individual story on the role of athletics is why you should be hired, or why you should be interviewed. That'll be your own individual style in your own individual way. But he wants these guys for all the reasons that we know. But what he also wants is he doesn't want homogenous things. He wants people from different backgrounds. He wants people of different ethnicities. He wants different because he thinks there's unbelievable energy. Just like when you look at the screen, when you think of our team, we have super affluent kids. We have kids coming from nearly nothing and everything in between. That's crazy interesting on a team, and that's crazy interesting to the businesses of the future. So you having some interesting experience in your background, whether it was a guy who was picking up rocks and moving them 100 yards away, that's interesting. It's just as interesting as having some relevant internship that connects to your job. Don't be afraid. Be yourself. Study what you want. It's more than enough. Work your ass off at school. You're going to get into these final conversations with these companies, and you're going to kill them all when you're prepared, and all the different lessons that Steve and Christian gave you. Not because you're like special, you went to Harvard and you're an athlete, but because you're going to be able to express it in a way that's palpable and meaningful and differentiatable. When your moment comes, be prepared, fellas. And that's it.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, boys.
See ya.
Yeah, Barney.
Mark
Oh, yeah.
Boyd.
Hey, boys.
Take care, fellas. Good job.